Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We are excited to have John Grant and Jenny Hollingsworth with us from Innovia Consulting. And before I pass it over to John and Jenny to cover on their topic, how to auto post using flushing methods, this is their Business Central for Manufacturing 101 series. I just want to let you know that we are recording this session, and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the questions box and we'll get them answered along the way. All right, and so now I'm going to pass it on over to Jenny to kick off our presentation.
Thanks, Angie. Hi there. All right, welcome to our session on how to auto post using flushing methods. First, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Jenny Hollingsworth. I'm a senior application consultant here at Innovia Consulting. I've been here, for those of you that don't know me, it'll be 15 years this year. And then I was at a prior NAV partner for about 10 years. So all in all, I have about 25 years of experience working with NAV. And I've been a lead consultant on projects, probably the last 18 to 20 of those years. So that's about my experience with NAV. So I'll pass it over to John and he can introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is John Grant. Obviously, I work at Innovia. I've been here. I used to have black hair. That's how long I've been here. And I just got done from extensive traveling from my upstairs to my downstairs. That's kind of my traveling these days. But I've had a chance to work with NAV. We've had a chance to teach manufacturing at Summit for a number of years. Previous experience, I've worked on several different ERP products, including AX, Made to Manage, Sightline, a few others. So have had a chance to be exposed to a lot of different companies and a lot of different issues they might have, and that's kind of what, when we go through what we're doing today, we try and relate it to what we've seen customers and how they use it. So hopefully that gives you some pointers of how you might use it. So thanks for coming.
All right. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking about everything related to auto posting. So what is auto posting? John's going to talk about lean concepts with auto posting, how we would automatically post material, which would be a little bit different than the labor side of things. So we'll cover all of that, review the setups, how to process for both material and labor. So I'll let John talk about the lean concept here.
Yeah. I don't know how many of you out there have had a chance to be exposed or on the lean journey, as they call it, as a company. And the big picture. I'm a real proponent of lean, Kanban, if you're familiar with that concept. When we implement, many times we pull some of those lean concepts to also support just the software of what it's doing, augment it to make sure that it keeps things simple. And a lot of times Kanban, a lean concept supports that. But for this, there's two other pieces that are a proponent of lean in BC. Posting consumption of raw material on a production order when you post output. For instance, if I'm making the same thing over and over and over, and I post a quantity of 100, my bill of materials is listed and showing me all the items that we need. And when we post, it can relieve inventory at the same time, saving you from having to report that consumption manually. Even if you have lot tracking or serial tracking, there are in the process ways to do that to help the users, and when they post output, and one advantage there is that obviously when you post in production, for those of you running NAV's production, you do start building WIP inventory on your financial side, so you have WIP, and that that becomes cost of goods sold eventually, but able to post material. part two of that is labor. I'm a proponent of your route identifies your planned times. Now, obviously, that's a plan and things vary, but as we get a focus to get your routings better and better and better, and it may be as simple as in 1 hour, we can produce 100 of these parts in this operation. And that labor, when I complete 100, could be posted. There's a couple ways we'll go through of how do we consume labor to match our routing. And I'm a proponent of that because in reality, when I'm managing the floor and I'm setting up my routings, I have a standard I've set up, and that's how you build your routing. That's how you roll up your costs and all those fun things to that you can manage in BC. And that routing, those steps are key to shop loading, scheduling, due dates, etc. And the better and better that route is, the better and better information I have to manage the shop floor. Do I need people out there to actually record? You may in some businesses, if you're truly a job shop where you're not making the same thing potentially, and you're quoting it, sales is quoting it, and you're putting an estimate in. Recording actual labor in those situations might make perfect sense because you've never done it before and you're working against a budget to understand how you did against the plan versus the execution. But for those companies that have a repetitive product, you're kind of making it not every day, but as orders come in, you produce it or you make it to stock. Having a ability to consume that labor when you post output is available, and that saves you from having to have a absorb labor at the end of the month to guesstimate. Got all this payroll, how much of that do we want to absorb into the cost of goods sold? So we'll go through that. And if you're a true lean proponent, that last statement on there, you're always in search of eliminating muda in lean, which is the Japanese word for waste. And recording actual labor is considered waste in a true lean implementation. They'd rather have you focus on that, getting the operation better and better, the plan, than having people constantly recording labor. But it's not for everyone, but we'll go through it. The material we see used a lot more than the labor, but you have options for both. A little long-winded, but that's really two pieces of BC that support what I call the lean approach to saving time or effort. And any questions on that, or good with that explanation?
Yeah, again, feel free to type in and ask any questions along the way, or type your question in the questions box, either or.
Yep, and we'd prefer that you do that as we go, because it's in the moment, and it might trigger someone else to think about a question in area 2. So.
All right, so the first area that John mentioned we're going to talk about is auto posting material. So consuming our raw material automatically. So let's look at some of the different ways that we could do that. So for auto posting a material, there's 2 ways we can do that. We can forward flush and we can backward flush. And then we can, if you see in our chart here, we can use it with routing link codes or without. So John, I don't know if you want to explain maybe some of the different concepts of how these would be used and maybe some examples of when you would see forward flushing versus backward flushing being used.
Yeah, we'll try and relate this to what we've seen customers use. The routing link code, if you're not familiar with that term, it's an interesting term. I've seen it called count point in other software and whatnot, but routing link code is the definition in BC. And all that simply does is allows you to take your bill of material and set up that these 3 items are needed at this operation, these 2 items are needed at this operation. So you can set that up. You can, in your bill of material, you can say, and it's called a routing link code, we need these at routing link code 30, and then in my routing, I have an operation where I assign routing link code 30. So if I were to do a pick or a stage material, I know which operation / work center or machine I need that material at. So it can be attached to that operation. That's what the routing link code is. Works real well. Now let's talk about the forward and backward. Forward flushing is, I think it's got real specific uses. And one of them is if you have a recipe. If you're a food processor or you're making a batch of a material like a paste or a, I don't know, you have a clay manufacturer, they have a recipe for a batch size. Let's say the batch is 500 pounds. Their bill of material is related to 500 pounds. So their recipe is I need 100 pounds of this and 50 of this and 20 of this. Or if I'm a food processor, I have a batch size, I'm making 100 pounds of potato salad. We have a customer that does that, and then the recipe matches that. And then, so what that allows you to do is at that operation, I can put all this material. And when I start that operation, I could automatically consume all that material because I've just built my recipe. I don't have to wait until I report output, because my output, I may not get 500 pounds of good product. I may only get 497. We had a customer that dyed fiber for blankets and things, so they have a dyeing operation, and they actually put in 100 pounds and got 105 pounds out. You know, how did that happen? Well, it was wet, so the weight of the product was more than the 100 planned, but the consumption of the material was forward flush because you know, the bill of material for 500 pounds of a product is always the same. So I can consume that automatically earlier rather than waiting until I start reporting output, because it may not have any relationship to output. It's a recipe. And it could be a liquid too. When you're mixing, you've got a vessel where you're filling with different liquids, and when that's started, just relieve material right away from inventory. So forward flushing, I'll say, is more we see in the recipe or formula business. So hopefully that makes sense how you might use that forward flush. Manual we didn't list, but manual, of course, is we don't have anything automated. We enter it as we go. Well, you know, we're talking about the auto flushing abilities in BC. So backward flush is another technique, and most customers use this, I'll say. It allows you that when I post output, if I've got it set up, my route and bill set up correctly, I post output of 100, I will consume enough components to make 100. So as I go, and this comes in handy on long-running production orders. If my production orders take, I don't know, 4 hours or less, you would not necessarily have to consume it as you go, because you would report it when you finish the production order, consume the material. That would be sufficient because it's a shorter running production order. But for long running production orders, meaning this production order is going to run for 3 days, maybe a 5-day one, I don't know, 3 days we'll go with. It's month end, they've worked on it today or yesterday, and now it's month end. I want those WIP numbers to reflect both labor and material. If I don't have any flushing enabled, possibly some components, but maybe you might all be waiting till the end. And now I've got to ask production or someone to tell me, take your best guess at how much material did you consume that hasn't been reported yet. And then there's the wonderful GL entry to increase work in process, for instance. I've seen that many times. But this allows you to consume as you post output, so that production order is still open, it's still on the floor, but I've got dollars flowing into GL for inventory value. And there's a nice cost shares report in GL that breaks apart let's say my WIP number is $10,000, you can run that report to have it break it apart. How much is material, labor, overhead? You would have all that available if we're back flushing labor as well as material. One of the things to be aware of is many customers, if they have multi-step routings, more than one route step, let's say you have 2, 3, 4, 5, if you attach your bill of material components to the last operation, and let's say the last operation was a packaging operation, for instance, but it took 2 days or 3 to get there before the packaging, you attach all the material to that operation, you will be aware, you need to worry about, when do I need this material for this production order in the planning side? Because if my due date for planning is the last day of the production order, day 3, I'm 2 days late. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And there's ways to handle that. So in your discussion, as you're setting up your bills and routes, there's a timing on when you send that requirement to planning. Because if I put it all on the last operation, we use that routing link code and we attach the last operation. If my production order is on the floor for 3 days, it's going to tell me, and that last operation doesn't start until that 3rd day, it's going to tell me I need all the material on the 3rd day, which is 2 days too late. So there's some consideration of how you set that up to make sure you cover that. The backward flushing, and that's quite frankly, most people or most customers use backward. We have some recipe and food people using the forward, but backward is used, I can say 90% that we work with. The other thing to be aware of is when you're backward flushing and you have a bill of material component that is a fraction of the inventory. Let's say your inventory is in pounds. So you have you have a paste or something that is in pounds, right? So you purchase it in, or the inventory unit measure is pounds, so keep it at that. My bill of material might be in ounces. I only need 6 ounces of it or whatever. And the system handles that all perfectly. It drives it all the planning, everything's wonderful. When I back flush that, I have to be aware of my rounding precision on that item that's in inventory that's in pounds. If I have a rounding precision of 1 and I post 1 output, it's going to take 6 ounces and round up to 1 pound. So maybe I'm jumping around here, Jenny. So, but
that's okay. You're just going ahead to the next slide.
Oh, okay. I get yelled at for that, by the way. But it's something to consider. Your rounding precision becomes very important when you consume as you go. If your component is a fraction of the inventory unit of measure, so just be aware of that. Works fine, but and then you of course would have a inventory unit of measure. You'd look and I have 100.12345 pounds of that item due to the precision of the rounding, because I might want to go 3 decimals possibly. It depends on my bill is at. If my bill is set up as 0.123 of a pound, then I would probably match my rounding to 3 decimals. And then how does that get squared up? When you do your cycle count every once in a while on that product to get it, square it back up to whole pounds. But that's an important thing to remember, because when you're back flushing as you go, it's going to round. If you have your rounding precision, if it's inaccurate, you're going to get some inaccurate consumptions.
So both the flushing method and the rounding precision are setups on the replenishment tab of an item. So you would want to set that up on the raw material component. Would there ever be a time, John, that you would set that up on the finished good?
Typically, well, there is. I'm going to say that If we have a customer that makes wire, hollowed out wire, okay, or hollowed out plastic casing that you wrap around wires. You put like 3 wires through it. It's a protection of that wire. When they make the product, it's so many meters or feet of it. They'll have a spool that's, let's say 500 meters. So production will run that. Then it comes over and it'll be cut to lengths. Like you want a 3-meter length, and you'll package those up. And actually, of interest, this particular product, when you cut it, it expands. So that was an interesting one, because the bill of material had to say if I wanted 3 meters, I would do like 2.8135 or something, because it expanded. But you might have fractional quantities of a finished item if it's a sub-assembly item that you cut, or that's probably the best example I can give you. A customer who produces a roll of a product and then cuts it, and it's not an exact measurement. It does some there's some unique things. And this particular product, to add to that, the weather had an impact. So if it was cold out, or barometric pressure was higher, or this or that number, that expansion would change. So we had to address that just with a process. You can do any modifications, but it's something to think through as you. Would you have fractions on a finished product? Probably, maybe a sub-assembly might have that, because we have that in that case, at least one customer that I can think of. So.
All right, so that's the setup. 2 fields were set up on the item card. And the next slide talks about the routing link code that John refers to, and how he'll explain how that would need to be set up on the production BOM and the routing.
Okay, this is where we are telling the system where we use this material at. So in our example here, we've got a bill of material with several items, and we are linking it to the output, the last operation. And these are shorter run production orders, so this is fine. Maybe this is on the floor for 1 day, 2 days, whatever. In this case, we attach it to the last operation through this technique called the routing link code. So all the components have a 99 in. The routing has a 99. I like to call last operation 99. It's just from what I've observed, when people are filling out time cards and they're reporting output, operation 99 is consistent on every production order. Like if we kept numbering this one, we'd be at 60, but maybe the next production order would be at 30 or 50. This way, operation 99 is always the operation that puts it in the inventory. Just easier for the guys on the floor, gals, to remember it, I think. But anyway, it's personal recommendation, I guess, if I had a choice. So in this case, we've linked every item to this last operation using the routing link code, and that's a base field in BC. If it's not exposed, you can add it. So it's not hidden. I mean, it's not something you need a developer to add it. You can just add it and start using it. You can define your own routing link codes. Choose your define. You can have more than one. If your process, we have one customer that they have maybe 2 or 3 routing link codes on their routing, because they pick parts and then they want to consume those as soon as anything happens. So they report output on that operation like 20, and then it consumes the components attached to it. And then operation 50 might have the same scenario, and then the final operation might have some. So you can have more than one routing link code used on a bill of material with the routing, and it just marry up to each other. Pretty easy to set up, and can provide you with eliminating that manual consumption effort.
Okay, so those are the different setups required for auto posting material. So why don't we move over to Business Central and then take a look at how the different flushing methods operate. So we'll do some production order posting to see how that works. All right, so we're in the web client of Business Central. And first, let's look at backward flushing. We'll take a look at backward flushing. John said that's usually the most common, but we will go through both backward flushing and forward flushing. And we'll take the easiest instance first. We'll have no routing link codes. So we're not going to assign our components to specific operation steps. So let's go to a released production order. And just quickly take a look at the components and the routing. So I'm going to look at production order 32. And down the line, let's look at the components. So it's copied all of our components over from our production BOM. And you'll notice here we have all our different raw materials. Okay, there's no routing link code, so it's not assigned to an operation step. And the flushing method is backward. So in this instance, when we change the status of this production order to finished, it will go ahead and back flush all of the components. But before I do that, I do need to post some output. I don't think any output's been posted on this one. Yep, finished quantity is 0. So let me just go ahead. I'm just going to use the production journal and manually post some output to this production order before we release it. All right, so since this one's supposed to be done, I'm just going to perform all of my operation steps. And my output quantity is 5. Go ahead and post the journal. All right, so back on the production order, if we would navigate and go look at the item ledger entries attached to this production order, we'll see that there's only the output transaction of we posted 5. You have not seen any of the consumption transactions yet. And that's because we decided to auto back flush without routing link codes. So when we change the status of this production order to finished, that is when all of the raw materials will post as consumed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to say this is a finished production order, and you'll see it's posting consumption. And it's now changed to a finished production order. So I'm just going to head over and look at that finished production order. So if we navigate to the item ledger entries now, you'll see it did all of the consumption of the raw materials on changing the status to finished.
And that's married up to your output quantity.
So John, if I were to, this one was for 5, but if I would output 4, would the consumption then be based on the quantity of 4?
Yeah, but it's based on what you did, not the plan. So you could output, you could have said I finished 7 also, and it would do the math, and it would check if you have inventory, obviously, or one post, you know, would squawk at you and say you don't.
Right, it would give you an error, inventory availability error.
So you couldn't finish it until you had enough inventory to issue.
Correct. So that's backflushing using no routing link codes, but let's look at backflushing with routing link codes. So let's go back and look at a release production order. Number 66 we'll take a look at. So this is also for a quantity of 5. And let's look at the components and the routing lines. All right. Somehow my production order here got updated. Let me just switch this back to what I originally had it set at. All right. So in this instance, pretend you didn't see that. The first 5 or 6 raw materials have a flushing method of manual because I want to manually enter those in either the consumption or the production journal. The last 3, the wrapper, the carton, and the label, are part of my packaging operation steps. And I want them to backward flush at that operation step. So this example is just showing that you don't ever have to add every single raw material or component. They don't all have to have the same flushing method. You can mix and match. With that, John, is there any examples you can think of or anything where a company might do that?
Possibly if you're controlling a specific lot or something you want used for a production order, you might assign it ahead of time and manually issue it. Yeah, I mean, it just be aware you can use manual along with backward and forward. So you don't have to have. It's not like you're all in one way of doing things.
Right. So then let's go look at the routing. So we saw the routing link code set up on the components, but if we look at the routing, all right, you'll see my very last operation step here is my packaging operation, and that also has the routing link code of package. So our package items will be consumed at that operation step. All right, so I'm going to go back to my production journal. And because the first 5 or 6 items were a flushing method of manual, I can actually consume those here in my production journal. It does not bring in the ones that are backward or forward flushed because those are automatic.
And just a note, because you set things up as backward doesn't mean you can report that stops you from reporting extra usage in your process. That's the plan. But if you would go and consume, let's say the operator, I don't know, drilled a hole wrong in a piece of equipment or something, you can go issue additional material to the production order in addition to what was planned. So even though you've set it up as backward or forward, you can still consume, add additional, for instance, color might be a thing. You mix your batch and the color's not quite right, so you go and add more color. You can do that manually to support the back flushing, as an example.
All right, I am going to post the consumption of the manual so we can see that. But for some reason, I do not see my routing lines in the production journal like I should.
Are they all set up as backward?
There they are. Maybe I just couldn't expand the screen.
Oh,
all right, so here's my work center. I'm going to go ahead again. The packaging materials should not be consumed yet. If we look at our item ledger entries for this order, you should only see the manual consumed items, which it's hard for you to tell because the description is not here, but I know my cart and my label and my the third one is not consumed as of yet. So if we go ahead and go to the production journal and post some time to that very last operation step. Oh, here we go again.
Just change it to all up on top, flushing method. Show.
There we go. All right, so we'll just add some run times to my different operation steps, because it's really the packaging step is the step that we need to get to post anytime. So the minute we post anytime to that operation step, it will relieve those or automatically consume.
No, hang on. You have to report output.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do that, did I?
At least 1 or 2 or whatever, yeah.
We'll do 3. All right, so now if we go and we look at the item ledger entries, right here, RM 1800, 2000, and 2100 are our 3 that consumed at time of packaging.
And it did enough for 3. Because that's what you posted output.
Any questions? Does anyone have any questions on backward flushing with or without routing links? John, anything else you want to show on the backward flush before we move to forward?
No, the biggest thing is to be aware of rounding, and we talked about that, so I'm good.
Okay. All right, so now let's just take a look at forward flushing. And for forward flushing, we need to get to a firm plan production order. So first, we're going to look at not using routing link codes with forward flushing. All right. So here, if I go to my line components, and you know, for some reason between yesterday and today, my 2 production orders changed. I don't know what happened. I had these all set up as forward or backward. So in your component listing to forward flush with no routing link codes, obviously the routing link column would be empty, and then our flushing method would be forward. And in this example, it would forward flush at time of releasing the production order. So we just have to change status to released, and it would go ahead and forward flush all those components. All right, so we'll go ahead and our flushing method is forward. Change status. And we're going to change the status to release because it's ready for the shop floor. You'll see here it's very quickly, it's auto-consuming all those components. Now if we move over to that release production order, if we look at the item ledger entries, all of our consumption should be done. And John, this is different than backward flushing, right? Because we haven't done the output yet. So the consumption is based on our expected output quantity.
Correct. And this technique where you release it and issues it, I think you're better served because I'm a planner, and I think, are we showing the next step where it's attached to an operation or not?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a planner. I probably would not like this because when I release it, it consumes the material, and I may be just, you know, releasing the order and printing a shop packet and getting things organized. But you can, if you have a case where this works, it's available to do it as soon as I release it.
All right. So let's look at the final one, forward flushing with routing link codes. So let's look at a release production order in this time, because we're going to forward flush the components at the time of posting an operation step. I'm kind of scared to look at my component list here because the last two have changed back to, yeah, so this one did again too. All right, and
It's good practice.
yeah, I don't know why it changed, everything changed back, but so on this slide, or the component listing here, you'll notice now everything's back to forward flushing, and everything here is set to a routing link code of 99. So everything will forward flush at the start of the operation for routing link code 99. And I better just check my routing to make sure that the routing link code of 99 is still there. And it is. So the routing link code of 99 is our last operation step.
And maybe a better serve would be if you put it on the first operation, Jenny, because it truly forward flushing as a recipe. Let's say the first operation is mixing, you know, getting it all staged. You would want to consume the material way up front versus at the end in a process. So we would put that routing link code on the first operation.
Okay, so I think
And I would just report, you know, some time on the first, and it should consume it.
okay. I'm not going to do that here because they've made this non-modifiable.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then just show it
Next
where
time
it's
I will.
at. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So if we go ahead and go to the production journal. And we'll put some time on the operation step that we post, you know, have the post output on. Once we post.
Don't wait, hang on. Oh, did you do it already? Because you won't necessarily post any output. You're just saying we started it. Even on our last operation, let's just say we started it. So you wouldn't really post any output. As soon as there's any activity, it will consume all those forward flush items attached to that operation. So any kind of labor, typically might be a setup or something, somebody is mixing things. Thinking about it.
I know.
Good time for questions. If anybody's got any.
For some reason, something changed in our database setup here. I am going to leave this page.
And if that
I think for time purposes, because we need to get to labor.
Yeah. What it would do is, the concept is I forward flush, I attach it to the typically first operation might be where I mix things together in a batch. As soon as I report 1 minute of labor on that, or anything on it, it consumes all the planned material. So that's the concept, and I think it works well for those that are recipe or you know, where they mix up formulas or things.
So one question, John, is serialized items, do they have to be manual all the time?
No. Let's talk about that for a second. Lot and serial. You can assign lots ahead of time on the material that gets moved to production. For instance, let's say I have my item set up as pick backwards on the production order, and it's on the picked list that somebody's got to go get it. When they register that pick, they can put the lot number on it that they picked or the serial numbers. And when I backflush or when it happens automatically, it's already populated. If it's not populated, of course, it's going to squawk and say, hey, I need a serial or a lot number. So the process, yes, you need to record that, but you can do it ahead of time. You don't have to wait until you're reporting output.
And if you're not using advanced warehousing where you were using picks, you could put it right on the production order components, right, John?
Yeah, we have a customer who doesn't use the warehousing, but they will assign the lot number right on the component in the bill of material, so it's ready to go.
What if you have bins on also? Next question.
Bins, it can, when you create your production order, if you're using warehousing, I'll do it with warehousing first. It populates the bin on the bill of material on the component. You know, the component on the production will say, I'm going to consume from, I don't know, production in bin or a machine bin. The pick off of the production order moves it from a shelf to that virtual pick bin on the production order. If you're consuming without warehousing and just using strictly bins, you can load that bin right on the component of where to consume it from. Now there are, I don't know how many of you are running warehousing, but there also is what something's called like a shop floor bin, meaning we stock some of this material right by the machine, so I don't go pick it. It actually populates the bill of material, the component with that bin also. That if you set it up that way. So the answer is yes, you have to address where are you consuming it from if you're using bins to keep your inventory accurate. Yes.
All right, one more quick question and then we'll have to move on to labor. So if my item is serialized, I want to set up a pick, correct? And should it be forward or backward flushing?
It can be either, because there's a pick. If you noticed, I don't know if you noticed it, but the flushing, there was a pick backward and a pick forward flushing. And all that, if you put in an item, all that component, then it just triggers that it's going to print on the pick. So you still got to move it to the bin that it's going to be issued from. So you're going to tell it what serial number you picked. Let's say it's a motor. You pick the motor. It's going to ask you for the serial number. It's ready to be issued when you, if it's a backward, but it might be a pick backward item that you know the picker records the bin it's taken from as well as enters the serial number. Or if it's lot tracked, you enter the lot number, so it's ready to backflush. So that just has to be loaded ahead of time, and then it will automatically consume it if you have it set up that way. Hopefully it makes sense to everybody.
Do you have to have full directed pick and put away turned on to do pick plus backward?
No, that works fine with the intermediate, as long as your warehousing turned on, and then if you have receive turned on, picks are by default turned on. And the answer is no. You don't need directed the full blown to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's talk about auto posting labor. So we talked about material, but what about auto posting labor? So John, what methods are there for posting labor, and what's most common?
The backward is the most common, I feel. So in other words, you have your routing, you've entered, I can do 100 an hour. That's your simple routing. I got one-step routing or two-step, whatever. You put that on the routing, that's used for scheduling, that's used to plan when do I need the purchased item in. That's all great. You can turn on to auto-consume labor based on your plan two different ways. Backward flushing, if that work center or machine is set up, the flushing method is on, and we'll show you that is on the work center or the machine. And you can, probably if we look, a lot of people have manual because they don't record labor. They might even, or they're recording it manually, but it's available. So if it's set up as backward and I finish the production order, it's going to consume labor based on the output quantity, based on our standard, whatever the routing said. It'll do all the steps if they're all set up as backward and consume all that labor into cost of goods sold. Forward flushing is a little unique. The way it's triggered is that you report the previous operation is finished. So I'm operation 10. I don't know if anybody ever noticed, but there's a finished flag you can turn on, meaning I'm done with it. As soon as I'm done with 10, and if 20 is set up as forward flushed, it would consume that labor automatically. That works well forward if you have a production order that is standard and you really don't deviate. We're going to make 10. We always make 10. We don't make 9. We don't make 11. That works well if your process is pretty consistent with when you launch orders to the floor. You could forward flush labor. That gets that into WIP sooner. The way the backward labor gets in there is only when you finish the production order. So if that's on the floor for 3 days, you won't have any labor until you finish that production order. That's the big difference.
So what type of setups?
Yeah, and it's pretty simple. It's you have work centers machines, and they have a flushing method available. If you look at it, and you got the 3 choices: manual, forward, backward, what we just talked about. And if you select, if you enter labor manually, or you forward or backward flush it, and most customers are backward flushing it, you need to set up your general product posting group to put that labor into accrued labor and debit work in process. That needs to be set up with that posting group that you see here, or in your system, whatever posting group that makes sense. Many customers will not address labor yet, but again, you're forced with the month-end GL entry for absorbed labor, that kind of thing. And they do standard cost roll-ups, or roll-ups. You can roll up with FIFO also. So I'll be quiet.
All right. No, it's fine. You're going to keep talking anyways. We're going to step over into Business Central to show your one-step production order.
Yeah. Just one last thing here then is we have some customers that they create a production order, and there's a way to create the production order and just change the status, and it posts quantities, output, and it could post labor and post material just by changing the status to finished. Has some use. We have it at some companies where they create the production order, they fill it, they finish it. And the way that works is it's a normal production order, as Jenny's showing here. But the difference is in the routing. We have one step here, and it's a backward flushed last step operation. And by definition, BC will assume whatever you said you're going to make in the plant, that's what you're going to make. So you never want to have the last operation be backward if you don't work that way, because you could report 8, finished a production order, and it'll think, oh, you must want to do the other 2 if the order was for 10. So the last operation cannot be backward unless you want it to match the plan. Hopefully it makes sense. But it allows me to create a production order, put it on the floor. Oh, you're done, finish it. Boom. Output's posted, items consumed, labor's posted, based on the plan. So you don't have to do an output journal, you don't have to do a production journal, you don't have to do a consumption journal, none of that stuff. It just does it. It does have some use. We have used it that way at some customers.
So on this example, John, do you want me to post a labor transaction to this? Or you just want to show?
You could just finish it.
Oh, okay.
So it's saying
Oh,
me
good.
not 20.
We're doing planned material and planned labor.
Yeah, we'll just do everything. We're run out of time a little bit. Just change status to finished, and we could then look at what did it do. I gotta go find it. So again, we didn't post any components, any labor, any output. And so if you look at the entries, we should have everything worked the way we want it to. It posted 20. See that? We never reported this. You know, it just did 20. And our components, my thought, are they're manual or something. We didn't have them set up correctly, right. But they'd be in here too.
They probably were set up backwards when we set this up, but all our production orders seem to have changed. So
okay, yeah.
So it would have posted
consumption. I create the production order. How many do I want? Finish it, and it does all the rest for me.
And then with the capacity ledger entries, it auto posted the capacity, the labor.
So that's a simple create the production order, finish it. And I don't do any component entries, any output entries, any labor entries. And in the right situation, that can work for some orders. You can mix and match these techniques in your one production system. You don't have to set them up all the same.
Okay, so we went through how to use forward and backward flushing methods for auto posting material and auto posting labor. And I know some of the questions revolve around warehousing. We will have a segment in a few weeks coming up on manufacturing with warehousing. So you might want to attend that and see if that might answer some of your questions. Any other questions? Otherwise, if you want to learn more, you can contact our resident expert here, John Grant.
That's a rumor, yeah. I got to travel again. I think I got to go upstairs.
So you'll be busy. It'll take you a while to get there. All right, and please feel free to join more of our manufacturing webinar series. So the next one will be on May 12th. Keep your stock right with reordering policies. So I think I will turn it back over to Angie.
All right, thank you, John and Jenny, for presenting today. And to everyone on today's webinar, or if you're watching on demand, we just want to thank you for joining us. And as you all know, we do have our annual customer conference that is coming up on May 21st. Due to COVID-19, we will be moving to a virtual conference. You can contact your rep or visit our conference page where we have all the details for our virtual conference, and that website is innovia.com/conferences. This is a free event for you to virtually attend, and we would love to have you take part in it. So register now so you don't miss out on this great event. And we do have more webinars coming soon. Next Tuesday, we will have our webinar review on our virtual customer conference for 2020. And also next Tuesday, we have Ross Botorf from Innovia Consulting. He's going to be presenting on how to create a control add-in for Business Central. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. And also check out our podcast that is going on. If you have not heard of it already, it's called the Innovia Conversation, and we just want to encourage you to listen to our selection that Steve Waltz and Jeff Pergolski have provided to us over the past year. They do about 2 episodes a month, and you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. All right, well, we thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.